So for those who don't know, Doctor Strange 2 was almost a completely different movie. A movie with a much darker villain, more cameos of Marvel characters, and spending more time in other universes. However, the movie we got took a lot of different directions, as the script was apparently rewritten 33 times, with them scrapping a lot of unique ideas that didn't make the final cut. Elizabeth Olsen even shared her frustrations about the constant changes to the script in an interview, and how she just stopped reading it after a certain point. We're going to explore the alternative storylines, deleted scenes, and unused character designs that were almost in the Multiverse of Madness. In one of the early versions of the movie, Scarlet Witch wasn't the main villain that Strange would be going up against. Instead of her being the rageful dark witch who wanted to use the Darkhold to bring back her kids, she was originally supposed to be a supporting character to help Doctor Strange adventure through the multiverse. The original villain was supposed to be Nightmare, a supernatural entity in the comics who is one of Strange's biggest rivals. Similar to Spider-Man and Green Goblin, he's a character who wields his victims' darkest memories against them to inflict pain, and comes from the dream dimension, another world where people's subconscious minds drift into when they fall asleep. The director of Doctor Strange 1 even wanted to use Nightmare in the first movie, but was concerned it might be too challenging to introduce audiences to the mystical arts and the dream dimension in the same film. A big reason why Nightmare wasn't the main villain, and why this movie went through so many changes, was that during production they switched directors. They replaced Scott Derrickson, who made the first Doctor Strange film, with Sam Raimi. Derrickson chose to leave the project due to creative differences he had with Marvel, because they weren't going to let him make the dark Doctor Strange movie he wanted to bring to life. In early development for the movie, there were some blueprints that show us a face-off between Doctor Strange and Nightmare on the frozen lake, and the set designer gave us some other photos that show us what the entire soundstage was going to be dedicated to, with one portion showing the ice lake set scene, and then there's going to be a large majority dedicated to a lake house and shoreline set. Now, the significance of the scene is that it's not just taking place on a frozen lake, but it's actually a lake that his sister died in. Because in the final version of the movie, we do have Doctor Strange reference what happened to his sister, and that she fell through the ice and he wasn't able to save her. And it looks like Nightmare was going to take Strange to one of his darkest memories and use it against him as they're going to face off on this frozen lake, where we can see the ice erupting out of the water and shooting up. But here in the background, we can see 4 figures in red watching this fight unfold. It's tough to tell who these people are from far away, but we did get some other photos that gave us a better look at the details about them. Once again, it is a 3D simulation, so there's not a lot of detail on the characters to go off of that reveal what actors or characters these were. In the middle, we can see one of the figures has swords on his back, and this leads me to believe that it's actually Mordo, who is a character from the first Doctor Strange movie and used swords as his primary weapon, and I don't think that's enough proof to say that it's just Mordo. But in one of the early versions of the movie and some other concept art, we can see that Mordo is actually going to be joining Strange on his journey through the multiverse, along with Wanda and Wong, who could be the identities to some of these other figures, which would leave one mystery character left, and I would have to guess that's maybe Christine. The artist did release other photos showing us portions of the scene, more specifically on the lake cabin. We know that this was going to take place in the dream dimension, and Strange seems to be exploring the forest and his familiar memory. Eventually, he makes his way over to the cabin and stands on the dock, which seems to be the prelude to this fight that's about to break out in the lake. We don't have any other information about this fight from the artists or the writers, but we do know that it exists thanks to the 3D simulation that was created by one of the artists over the movie. Now, for the first Doctor Strange movie, there was some concept art showing us a similar scene taking place where Doctor Strange is facing off against Nightmare, who is once again on a horse, and this time it's on top of an airplane. Michael Waldron, who was one of the new writers who came in with Sam Raimi, shared that Marvel didn't think Nightmare would suit the multiversal focus of this movie, so they pivoted away from it and instead chose Scarlet Witch. He even said that Marvel had plans for her to be a villain in an Avengers movie down the line, but they decided to ramp up her villainous role abruptly for this movie. There was some concept art developed showing Nightmare depicted in the same style as the lake scene, where we can see a figure on the scroll as he's wearing some medieval armor. The illustration depicts him being mentioned in these ancient scrolls as a mythical figure from a long time ago. Some storyboards were developed when Nightmare was originally the main antagonist in the movie, showing us a fight between Strange and Nightmare in what looks like to be the dream dimension. The artist who created these didn't write a description for the storyboards or provide any detail on where in the movie this took place, as they were just included with all the artwork that this artist made for versions of Multiverse of Madness. We can see Doctor Strange here on the left using a sword, which isn't his typical weapon of choice, which he likely got from one of Nightmare's possessed minions that we see in one of the later photos. This entire fight sequence is taking place in what looks to be another dimension. The spiraling staircase in the background is an indicator from the artwork that it belongs to this deleted scene. On the right, we can see another sorcerer that's beginning to project some magic from their gloves. It looks like an alternative design to what modern Nightmare would look like, as he could have evolved over time since he was last depicted in the ancient scrolls. In another panel of the storyboards, it shows us a samurai charging at Strange with him emerging out of a mirror of some sort, and it's shattering if you look at the background. And in another photo, we can see Strange casting a spell back at the armored figure, where the spirit inside seems to have vanished, with the armor no longer being possessed and falling apart, with him collecting the sword from the samurai armor and using it against Nightmare to try to use one of his own weapons against him. There are two other photos of Strange in the same area, where one looks to be levitating up above the stairs, and one where he's getting knocked down into the never-ending spiral, maybe because he got hit by Nightmare. There are some people who thought this figure could have been Doctor Doom because of the way he was dressed. It's quite unlikely that Marvel would have wanted to introduce him in this movie, and if anything, they wouldn't give the concept artist permission to release this. A different artist made some concept art for an unused scene in the movie, which has similar background elements to the sketched out storyboard staircase. In the center, we can see America Chavez in a possessive state, with her levitating up in the air with a spotlight on her. To her right, we can see a figure in a robe that looks different than the other depictions of Nightmare. This time it looks like he's bald. Notice how the bottom of this image matches up with the never-ending spirals we saw earlier. The upper environment has more cathedral-like architecture for the design, along with the hallways having stairways that don't make physical sense, with some going up or down. The storyboard artists who did illustrations of the fight between Strange and Nightmare also shared their art for the updated version of this movie. We can piece together a different outcome of Wanda's encounter with the Illuminati. It looks like Captain Carter wasn't meant to be taken out so quickly, as we can see her in the tunnel sequence where Strange and America are running away to escape Wanda. Instead of her getting sliced in half by her own shield, it looks like she was supposed to buy some time for America and Strange with these illustrations, showing us a fight taking place between Captain Carter and Wanda in the tunnels. The scene would start out with Wanda breaking through the metal wall and revealing a bloodshot eye. Then she'd start throwing some projectiles at Carter, either pieces from the breaking wall or just miscellaneous items, with Carter blocking a lot of the stuff that's thrown at her with her shield, which seems to get Wanda even more angry. Another frame showing Wanda ripping parts of metal from the wall and launching them while she says, "Thought you'd had enough," which Carter would reply to this with the classic, "I can do this all day" line. They did end up using these exact lines in the final version when they were fighting upstairs in the Illuminati's lobby. The rest of the illustration plays out with Wanda getting closer and closer to Carter while throwing more objects her way. It seems that she was able to hold her ground long enough for the two of them to escape, but the scene ends off with a farther away shot showing Carter and Wanda facing off in the distance. We can guess who would have won this battle, with Wanda seemingly getting more powerful as the movie progressed, and especially more violent. One of the other panels of the storyboard also revealed a different version of the Illuminati that we got in the movie. They did have a lot of different contenders for the Illuminati, with the writers constantly swapping the cast because they had a variety of characters to choose from. It's an element of the movie that Marvel tweaked the most. One thing that may stand out too is the giant Iron Man suit in the middle. Obadiah Stane, who was the first villain in the Iron Man movie, and it looks like they had some sort of plan to have him, or a variant of Ironmonger, return to be one of the heads of the Illuminati. There were no reports of Jeff Bridges being in talks to reprise his role, as it looked like it was just an early idea that the artist had in mind, but was ultimately scrapped. There was another Iron Man related contender to be one of the heads of the Illuminati. Believe it or not, at one point Tom Cruise was considered to show up as a Tony Stark variant. In this universe, the 838 one, we saw that the Iron Legion and Ultron worked out successfully for Tony, with him getting his suit of armor around the world. The writers wanted to have the Iron Man of that universe be played by Tom Cruise, who was originally meant to play Tony Stark in the 2008 Iron Man movie, with Marvel deciding to choose Robert Downey Jr. The reason that Tom Cruise didn't show up for this movie is that production was going on during the pandemic, and they faced a lot of constraints, and at the same time Mission Impossible was being filmed, so Marvel thought it'd be unlikely that Tom Cruise would join the cast of this movie with everything he had going on. It also worked out in Marvel's favor, with them wanting to give the audience a break from seeing too much Stark tech post-Endgame, as they planned to show more Iron Man technology in other series down the road, like Ironheart in the cancelled Armor Wars series. In the illustration, you'll also see a figure that doesn't look similar to any of the variants. This is Balder the Brave, an Asgardian knight who is Thor's half-brother. He also would have been the leader of the Illuminati as a fierce Asgardian warrior to lead them against Wanda. Daniel Craig was even in talks to play this character, and they were pretty close to having him in this movie. They even made concept art of what Craig would look like when he's dressed in the Asgardian armor, showing him in the golden blue costume with him wielding a sword. When they were filming Elizabeth Olsen's face-off against the Illuminati on the soundstage, there was a stand-in for Balder that was wearing the exact costume we saw in the concept art. This really shows how messy the movie's production was, with them filming scenes with a character without the actor even being fully signed on. When we zoom in, we can see a sword impaling Balder as he's lying down on the ground. We don't know exactly what was going to happen in this draft version of the fight, but according to some rumors, Wanda was going to use her magic to make Balder use his sword to take himself out in front of the Illuminati members. This would have been a gruesome way to go out, and I wonder if Disney would have allowed this to be in the final version. In the end, the final cast would swap out Ironmonger and Balder the Brave with Patrick Stewart's Professor X and John Krasinski as Reed Richards. And this was Marvel's first appearance of a Fantastic Four character in the MCU, and the main reason we got Krasinski in this role is because he was a desired fan cast choice. The concept art shows us some alternative costume designs they had for Reed. The design on the left looks closer to the final version we got in the movie, with it just having minor reductions with the black stripes in the fabric. This next costume looks pretty similar to the one before, with some slight changes to it, having more blue. Pay attention to the Fantastic Four symbols on all these because you'll see that each of these had different variations of the logo. This one looks more like your typical four compared to the other ones that stretch out to the border of the circle. This one in the middle actually lines up the most with Pedro Pascal's costume. The artist had to create a Reed Richards suit that wouldn't infringe on what the MCU Fantastic Four movie was going to do, so they had to make the suit distinct enough for this one occasion. Funny enough, with the new Fantastic Four, everyone else had these white collars on their costume except for Reed. A possible explanation is that it's easier for the VFX artists when they're animating Mr. Fantastic's body stretching, that they don't have to worry about his white fabric on the collar. And Doctor Strange 2 did come out a full 3 years before Fantastic Four, so Marvel wasn't fully set on the costume designs for them. The other two designs look awfully similar to the middle one, with them sharing the same collar outlines and gloves. One had a more faded shade of blue and the other had black as the main color. Marvel just needed this Reed Richards to look similar to the classic Fantastic Four costumes, but be different enough of a design that it wouldn't limit what they could do in the Fantastic Four movie. Krasinski was also added into the movie in post-production, with Elizabeth Olsen and Haley Atwell confirming that he wasn't present when they filmed their scenes in early drafts. It also wasn't too hard for Marvel to write him in because he had such a short appearance. One of the writers even shared how in early drafts of the movie, there was a post-credit scene that was meant to tease the Fantastic Four. The idea was for someone to be watching the security camera footage of the events that unfolded at the Illuminati headquarters, and then a stretchy hand would reach out to rewind parts of the tape. This was also meant to set up the Baxter building and give fans a first look at the character. Instead, we ended up getting an upgrade with Krasinski being written into the movie to show us the first appearance of Reed Richards through a variant. That way Marvel wouldn't have to worry about paying off an end credit scene, which they seem to be having a lot of problems doing recently. Along with the Fantastic Four First Steps movie taking place in a separate universe than the 838 one, one of the writers even revealed that they put a Doctor Doom Easter egg in the Illuminati scene, with the entrance of Reed showing similarities to Doctor Doom's technology. They talked about this in the director's commentary.
Work with
Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four.
So is John.
Hello, Stephen.
Teleportation device he uses to get into the scene is something we took from the comics. That's Doctor Doom's time door, time platform.
Stephen, but it's not the Scarlet Witch that we fear.
And while it is not Professor X's first time on screen, it is the first time we see that hover chair from the animated series.
Reed Richards is my favorite Marvel Comics character, so it was a real honor to write his first entry, I guess, here in the MCU.
Which raised a lot of questions about if Doctor Doom was a possible character that was almost in the movie. With this, it confirmed that this universe's Reed Richards had encountered Doctor Doom in his lifetime, and that there was one in this universe, which is them laying the groundwork for Doom's technology, as we may see this in the next Avengers films. People also thought the portal technology looked really similar to the TVA doors, which isn't too far off because they both use quantum energy. In the Illuminati scene, you'll also notice that one of the chairs is left open, as this raised a lot of questions on who the final member of the Illuminati was. Some people suspected that it was left open because it belonged to Doctor Strange of that universe who died on Titan. This would be a reasonable explanation because they explained that he was the founding member of the Illuminati. However, one of the writers was asked about this and they couldn't give us a clear answer on who the chair belonged to. That's also an unanswerable question, but we talked about that a lot though. Maybe that was just a mistake. Maybe the set guy had one too many chairs. The interviewer followed up by asking if he knew the identity of who it belonged to, or if it was open-ended, with the writer stating, a bit of both. As this shows that he and Raimi and Marvel spent a lot of time deciding what to do regarding this empty chair. If it was this universe's Doctor Strange, I'm not sure if they'd hesitate to reveal it, because the answer seemed more complex than that. There was one member of the Illuminati that was considered to be in it, and also could have been this empty chair. One of them being Namor, who in the comics is a big part of the Illuminati. The usual members are Iron Man, Professor X, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, Reed Richards, and Namor. One of the writers confirmed that Namor was a possible contender in this movie, but since Black Panther 2 was coming out a couple of months down the road, Marvel wouldn't want its first appearance of this character to be closely colliding with Black Panther 2. And knowing the fate of all the members, they'd likely have to show Namor getting wiped out by Wanda, which wouldn't help establish him as a strong character to the audience, even though he's a really powerful one. Another contender that we know about is Wasp. We didn't get too much information about this variant, whether it be played by Evangeline Lilly or another actress. However, we do know her fate and what would happen to her, and that during the battle against Wanda, she was going to shrink down and fly towards her, and as she was flying towards her, she was going to get smushed between the two hands of Scarlet Witch. Some of the concept art showed the alternative looks they almost gave America Chavez. One very noticeable change is her hairstyle, which would have made her look like a completely different character. They didn't switch up her hair too much, as they wanted to keep her look similar to a traditional teenager while also being a superhero. A common theme among all the other designs was the star. They settled on giving her a costume similar enough to her comic book appearances, and they didn't want to redesign her look entirely. With all the reshoots they did, it may have gotten complicated for them to keep the same hairstyle for Xochitl Gomez. Elizabeth Olsen stated in some interviews that Wanda was supposed to be more gruesome in the movie, with her supposed to kill a lot more characters throughout the story, something she struggled to understand because Wanda was suddenly evil and it felt unexpected due to her character arc at the end of WandaVision. There's a deleted scene from the movie and its storyboard that gives us a better idea of what Marvel held back on. One of the deleted scenes involving Mordo, who we did get to see in this movie, but as a variant in the 838 universe. It was meant to be one of the opening scenes for the movie, and give us an idea of how lost Wanda was after losing her kids, and also how violent and powerful she was becoming. Mordo was previously teased at the end of Doctor Strange 1 with being fed up with there being too many sorcerers and going on a manhunt. We actually got some concept art showing us what this battle would have looked like, showing us that it's the same decaying forest and garden that Strange confronted Wanda at, and we can see in the background Wanda's beginning to use some of her powers and eventually take out Mordo. The scene would have played out with Mordo attacking Wanda and getting turned into tiny pieces just like Mr. Fantastic. There's also another image of the scene, as shown in one of the early posters of the movie. We can see Mordo walking around in the same gothic background, and deeply in there we can see Wanda in the back. And later in the movie, when Wanda would arrive at the Sanctum to retrieve America Chavez, she was going to reveal the head of Mordo while she was levitating in front of Doctor Strange. We got a storyboard of this deleted scene, with Wanda using Mordo's separated head to intimidate Strange, as she would use her magic to reveal his head when saying, "There's the last person who threatened me." There's also some artwork showing us what Mordo's head was going to look like in this scene, and not only was the scene deleted from the movie, but it was also scrapped from the story altogether, which leaves the door open for him to return in the future and continue his manhunt for the sorcerers, something that Strange even referenced in this movie when he ran into the alternative universe Mordo, how he had been trying to kill him for the last couple of years. There was also some concept art released that showed us a draft idea of what our universe's Mordo was going to look like, and also his weapon of choice, showing that he's originally going to be using a whip of some kind, likely enhanced with his sorcery magic. A weapon we've also seen Doctor Strange use, with him having this magical lasso that he's able to catch people with, like in Spider-Man No Way Home for example, when Peter was trying to escape the Sanctum. Them deciding to abruptly cut Mordo's character arc would have been a little disappointing, as it would have been a weak payoff for the teaser they left at the end of the first movie, along with the original director Scott Derrickson seemingly to have plans for Mordo down the road. With some other unused concept art from Scott Derrickson's version showing Mordo being involved in this story. In this photo we can see Strange finding a dead variant of himself, accompanied by Mordo on his right, who seemingly seems to be joining Strange on some sort of adventure and not hunting him down. And in the background we can see Wong and Wanda, who looks like she's there to help Strange and not hunt him down to try to bring back her dead kids. Hopefully we'll get to see Mordo return in the future, but a lot of it's up in the air right now with everything going on. There was also another variant who almost appeared in this movie, which we sadly didn't get to see. Notice how the title is Defender Wong, similar to Defender Strange, who we saw in the opening scene with him in America running away from the ribbon creature that was chasing them. Usually toy designs are sent out in advance before they start filming, which is why we got a toy of a character who never appeared in the movie. We don't know exactly when this character was supposed to appear, but some rumors and concept art looks like he may have showed up at the beginning of the movie. There's another piece of concept art showing what looks to be Doctor Strange, America Chavez, and Wong in the background. It's not clear if this was made during the Scott Derrickson version or the Sam Raimi one. Based on how the person is dressed and the bald head, it's not too bad of a guess to assume that this is Wong right here. In some other concept art, we get to see Wong was originally supposed to join America and Strange on their journey across the multiverse, with them traveling to a brightly colored foliage-themed New York City. Instead, in the final version, what we got was him being a prisoner of Scarlet Witch at the Chthon tomb. And in one version, it looks like Wong wasn't meant to survive the events of this movie at all, with one piece of concept art showing us a brutal way for him to go, and the early horror elements of the movie that were cut. This is actually the first piece of concept art I can't show because of what it looks like, but if you've ever played the game Fruit Ninja, you know how it plays out in the game for the melons. When Marvel first announced their Phase 4 timeline, it showed us how connected these two titles would be, unveiling that the release dates for WandaVision and Doctor Strange 2 would be within months of each other. Kevin Feige revealed that one of the early plans was to have Doctor Strange show up in the finale of WandaVision. He would have showed up as a supportive character to help her figure out the new chaos magic she was encountering. Having Strange appear in WandaVision would have also given us a different beginning to the movie, with these two already knowing each other, and this was written when Scarlet Witch was meant to be a supporting character and not the villain. And when they were writing Doctor Strange 2, the writers had no idea what was going to happen at the end of WandaVision, which led to different creative visions and planning for the storyline, and ultimately complicated things with Wanda's character arc. A big gripe that fans had with this movie was that at the end of WandaVision, Wanda fought off being corrupted by the Darkhold and got a better grasp on the chaos magic. She defeated Agatha in the end and wasn't seen as some ruthless, wicked witch, only for her to break down in the next movie. While the reasoning for Wanda's brutal and extreme actions was there in the writing, which was how the Darkhold book was corrupting her, it was a little hard for viewers to see beyond the whole "she wants her kids back." The artist had some brilliant ideas on how to display the corruption that was taking place, with some unique looks for her near the end of the movie. The only indicator we got in the final version were her darker fingertips, and the concept art shows us another level they could have brought it to, showing us a much more zombie-like Wanda. Other illustrations show a much more demonic depiction of Scarlet Witch, with all of the recognizable elements of Elizabeth Olsen being gone. This really would have been a step up in showing how gone Wanda was in the efforts to bring back her kids. Notice how the crown on her is really pale. They wanted her possession state to reach a point where the crown became infused with her body, as the crown would no longer be made out of any material and it was just her flesh. There were also some slight changes to Captain Carter's costume from the early designs they made, showing us some very minuscule differences with the outlines of the UK flag. They almost had Hayley Atwell wearing a cap in this movie. It looks like they weren't set on how to style her hair with the cap. They didn't incorporate any of these designs because they wanted this variant to align more with the Peggy Carter from the What If series. At the end of the movie, we were introduced to Clea, who warned Strange that he caused an incursion, with them venturing off together as a little bit of a cliffhanger. The artist went through a lot of different iterations for Clea's design, some that featured a more gothic look and implemented more witch-like features into her appearance. They took their time developing her look because she's a really important character in the Doctor Strange stories, and in one of the early versions she was meant to appear as a love interest for Strange, but then ended up getting cut out. There was also a fully completed costume design for the Doctor Strange who was killed by Black Bolt on Titan. This variant was known as Supreme Strange. The cloak was also similar to the Dark Strange from the What If series. They did use the chest piece for the design of him on Titan, and this character design for the statue of Doctor Strange on their universe. There was also concept art made for a variant of Stephen Strange, who was a street magician during Scott Derrickson's production. The artist shared that this was made during lockdown and scrapped when Raimi entered the project. This variant was also supposed to be a regular person and not have any powers. We don't know when we would have seen this variant during the movie, but given the background it seems to be in a frosty terrain. Raimi also shared that the original cut for In the Multiverse of Madness was a lot longer. The final runtime came out to 2 hours and 6 minutes. Raimi shared that at one point the cut was around 2 hours and 40 minutes. This is a massive increase in runtime, which would have made this movie longer than Infinity War. It was intended to be an important movie to establish the multiverse and the various threats across other universes, but ultimately struggled to juggle too many elements. Thank you guys for all of the support on my videos recently. It really means a lot. I just started this channel a couple months ago and I'm glad you guys are enjoying this. I'm also going to be doing some non-Marvel related videos, so subscribe so you don't miss any of those when I post them. And this video did take a while to put together, so if you don't mind liking, that would help me out. And in the comments, let me know what ideas they should have kept in the final version of the movie. Thank you guys again, and see you in the next video.